it is my pleasure to introduce Dr. Loreta Tauginienė. Dr. Tauginienė plays an active role in the promotion of academic ethics and research integrity in Lithuania and European Union. Presently, Loreta is a researcher at the Department of Management and Organization, Hanken School of Economics in Finland, and the co-editor-in-chief of Journal of Academic Ethics. And Dr. Tauginienė is the Lithuania ombudsperson or the national contact window in the Council of Europe platform on ethics, transparency, and integrity in education, and the co-chair and board member of the European Network of Research Integrity Office. Dr. Tauginienė received her PhD in business administration from Nicholas Romanas University, Lithuania, with the focus on academic ethics. Her specialties include academic accountability, universities, social responsibility, citizenship, and so on. And this is my great pleasure to have Dr. Tauginienė to give an online speech entitled Practicing Responsible Scholarly Publishing. Let's welcome Dr. Loreta Tauginienė. Go ahead. I have tried my best.
Yeah, you did your really very best, very best. And I really, first of all, thank you, Professor Tau, for introducing me. So I probably will skip this slide on my behalf. And I feel mutually privileged to have the opportunity to give a talk to the Taiwanese academic community and other professionals about how responsible scholarly publishing should be practiced. So I will change with my slides. So this is something that has been already introduced by the university vice president. So I don't think that there is anything that needs to be repeated. But given my overall experience, I'd say that the main focus here that I'm interested in interdisciplinarity from different angles, and one of my backgrounds, education backgrounds, relies on interdisciplinary studies, and therefore I really have experience in working with researchers from biomedical sciences, natural sciences, and humanities. So myself, I'm a social scientist. Okay, so as already mentioned, I'm the editor-in-chief of the Journal of Academic Ethics, and I'd like shortly to introduce this journal to all of you. As later on in my slides, I'm going to provide some examples based on my work in this journal, and also provide some other examples from the practice. So this journal was founded about a bit more than 20 years ago by two prominent scholars, Deborah Poff and Alex McCullough. Before the establishment of this journal, they founded another highly ranked journal, which is Journal of Business Ethics. And so I contribute to the quality of Journal of Academic Ethics, and started this doing just a few years ago. I do this not by myself only. I have an associate editor, Shiva Sivasobranyan from the University of Derby, and he is a scientist in biomedical sciences, as we've got quite a lot of contribution that relates to issues of research ethics as well as research integrity in these fields of sciences. And definitely we have international editorial board that you may look at the journal website. So as a journal, we follow COPE guidelines. COPE is a Committee on Publication Ethics. We publish 4 issues per year. At least 10 papers per issue are included. And definitely we provide an opportunity to co-guest the special issue. the application form you can find on the website of the journal. Now we started inviting 4 types of submissions: research article, review article. Additional 2 that have been added recently are opinion article and book review. If to look at the statistics of the last year, the percentage of submissions accepted was about 20%. Other metrics, as you might be interested in this as well, you might see that in the category ethics, the journal is ranked in the 4th position among 77 journals. It has an impact factor. You may see that SNP is above 1 and the site scores above 4. And if you have any questions about the journal, definitely you can contact me either via email, Twitter, or LinkedIn. This is kind of communication channel that I use, and anyone can ask their questions through these channels. The journal itself, it provides some good opportunities both for authors and reviewers. So the first one I would like to talk about is authors. So for example, yes, definitely we have open access publication costs, which definitely are paid by the research team project, if there is such. Or if there isn't, there are transformative agreements with Springer. And I checked the website before my presentation. There are 7 Taiwanese institutions which are members of the Spring Nature's membership program for journals and Springer fully open access portfolio. But I do imagine that in Taiwan, there are much more institutions that provide higher education and do research. So if that's the case, that your institution is not eligible to this transformative agreement, each author is asked to sign a license to publish. And in terms of this license, the author do not have to request any permission for specific uses of their own materials, as long as they give credit to the published article. Again, each corresponding author of the paper receives a shared it link, which means that's a very new thing in Springer that was established about probably 2 or 3 years ago. And the corresponding author is allowed to share this link with co-authors on social media and elsewhere for non-commercial and personal purposes, which is mean if your paper it has no access through the regular check of the website while the author share that specific link, anyone can have access to the paper and read it and further refer to it in their studies. Reviewers are recognized in our seat. This is another platform of researchers' IDs. So if reviewers sign up and volunteer to review to the journal, they are recognized here. And definitely from the next year, we're going to publish a thank you list of reviewers who contributed with their expertise to the journal. That's very short about the journal itself, to give you an idea what is happening there and why I do provide some specific examples based on this journal in my presentation. Okay, so I will start with the key roles in scholarly publishing. This is not something untraditional or unknown, I would say. But this is something that needs to consider it very carefully when we think about the potential roles or key roles, and definitely how they can shape the scholarly publishing itself. So definitely we have at least 4 groups, which are authors, editors, reviewers, and readers. And all these 4 groups contribute to scholarly publishing. I do not add the one who who handles the administration of the journal, such, for example, as a publisher. And in that case, the publisher might be, as I mentioned, Springer, who publishes Journal of Academic Ethics. That might also be the university or any other body who contribute to the lifetime of the journal. So key roles of authors. I made a couple of slides to this to explicate, because there are quite many roles that authors who contribute with the research to the field should be aware of. And the first one I would probably put in is that it is crucial to conduct research in an ethical manner and report its finding in a transparent way. And that relates to the European concept open science, which means not only having publication published as open access, but also opening data sets in the way that do not undermine research participants' consents and the data they contributed. Then to substantially contribute to the work and acknowledge others who do not meet the criteria of authorship, which is I will speak later about this in more detail, about ethical and unethical authorship. But definitely, again, there is a latest request. If you want someone to acknowledge, you have first of all to ask that person if he or she wants to be acknowledged and mentioned in a specific report or research paper or book. Then to respectively negotiate authorship, especially when there is power imbalance, for example, among PhD students and the supervisors, or maybe among researchers of different career levels, such as, for example, associate professors and professors and maybe assistant professors. So again, should be power imbalance should be carefully taken into account and definitely respectively negotiated when the question comes to name who should be the author in the publication and how this list or what kind of order should be applied to the list of authors. Then definitely to contribute to the advancement of the research field, as we always are expected as researchers to bring some new knowledge, new insights, look for new avenues. So there is an avoidance of research waste. Definitely we want to read every day something that is fresh and new and relevant to our field. Again, once the paper is submitted, or the manuscript is submitted, and there is some other key roles of author that I would distinguish. One of them is to include the manuscript as suggested. In my practice, it happens so that authors ignore each suggestion made by reviewers, and the manuscript is submitted as revised, but actually there is no improvements made that better the quality of the study described in the manuscript. So definitely, I would always suggest to improve the manuscript as suggested, and there might be an option that one or two comments are not relevant because it's not feasible to address that comment due to time restrictions, or maybe there is no data in your study to include as suggested by the reviewer. Another key role of authors is to be responsible for the part of the manuscript or the whole manuscript if that's a single authored manuscript, and related eligible practices, which is mean that each paper might have consequences. We can relate it to the positive evaluation, to rewards after you get your paper published in a highly ranked journal, but this is also about the situations when you are asked to provide a comment about some alleged malpractice. For example, there is a question about accuracy of your statistics analysis. So definitely that should be very well understood, that that responsibility should be taken into account as well. Then, if you as acting as a reviewer or as a reader, you observe that there is an appropriate feedback, not only on the feedback, but rather an issue in the paper itself. So you definitely have to, as well to report it to the journal and to notify if something gets wrong, because some malpractices they occur not only at the public and the submission stage, they might also occur in the post-publication stage. Then to report an appropriate feedback of a reviewer to the editor-in-chief if the comment is an offensive. I've got one case in my practice when an author claimed that reviewer made inappropriate feedback, which means it used an offensive wording, and had to deal with the situation so both parties could make a progress and focus on the paper. Then definitely to uphold and support authorized and licensing laws. And mostly, I would say, from what I observe, it relates to self-plagiarism issue, as people tend to rely on the myth that if that's the paper published by myself, I can reuse it without digging into what authorized expects me to do or do not to do. So this is something that really should be carefully taken into account, including as well as others authorized. For example, if you want to use a figure, an image, and if it's copyrighted, definitely you have to take into these details. Definitely the exception is about the papers that are published under Creative Commons license. These are different matters. Then to collaborate with the editor-in-chief, where the editor-in-chief informs about the handling of alleged malpractice when there are some already case that there's something wrong with the paper itself, and it's also investigating, asking to provide a comment, an explanation, and definitely support it with the evidence, not only sharing vague statements, what has been done during the research and writing of the manuscript. So definitely collaboration, it doesn't mean, it means that editor-in-chief seeks to explore the situation, to investigate the situation itself, but it doesn't necessarily end with the malpractice itself. So that's why I use this wording alleged malpractice, which is mean this is only an investigative part. Key role of editors. There will be a chapter forthcoming next year, edited by the researchers from Australia. And I contributed here about roles of editors, how they should be defined. And I think that's very important to know, as you, or probably most of you, are in the role of an author, and what you should expect from editors, journals or book editors, whatever they are. So they definitely should be honest, fair, collegial, and open in their dialogue. They definitely should uphold ethical standards, which it means, for example, as I mentioned already earlier, the Journal of Academic Ethics abide by COPE guidelines. Also, editor is responsible and accountable for the journal quality, As I mentioned, author should contribute to the field of research, and editor is contributing within the role as being an observer and intervener to this field by, for example, suggesting special issues on specific topics. Then another role is to recruit field expert members of the journal editorial board. So the most demanding expertise is the first place here. And definitely that is enriched with a large pool of reviewers as field experts. And definitely to revise the journal policy. As you know, there's quite a lot of things happening around due to artificial intelligence lately, and some instructions for authors should be revised and improved and even customized in the way what is happening in scholarly publishing enterprise overall. Other roles that editors should be committed to are enabling high ethical standards, or preventing research malpractice and ensuring research integrity, which is mean that if there is a case that is reported to the editor-in-chief, either about reviewers, offensive feedback, or authors' plagiarism or self-plagiarism, each case should be carefully investigated. So editors should be both attentive and responsive to prospective malpractice in the submitted manuscripts. The editor could use different tools that facilitate this role, and definitely himself or herself should be very engaged into this responsibility. Then to have a societal gatekeeping responsibility to ensure that ethical misconduct is eliminated or reduced, which is mean that when the investigation ends, there should be a public notification on a specific paper what has happened, and either it could be retraction or correction, depends on what has been detected after all. So there are two examples I'd like to show. Already mentioned, Journal of Academic Ethics. We use two softwares at least that facilitate the detection of plagiarism and self-plagiarism, and another one is helps to find it out whether the paper that was submitted is paper mill or not. Then another example from the Smart and Gaston study findings that says that over 60% of journal editors check every manuscript for alleged plagiarism or submission, and often they encounter research malpractice, which is really a huge quite rate. I would say if such issues exist in as many journals as were included in this study for investigation, but that's quite a large percentage. And definitely a less part after perusal and revision of the text matches, approximately 15% of all submissions contain plagiarized or duplicated content. So definitely what they observe that this comes from authors affiliated with low-income, non-Anglophone countries. If to take the practice of the Journal of Academic Ethics, we also have some instances, not so many, very few each year, when the submitted paper has self-plagiarism. That's the most case, I would say. And as I mentioned, this is only a few cases, so probably I would say I don't have a statistic, but probably I would say an impression that probably about 5 papers per year have such issue. And in one case, which is the latest one and quite new, I've got is that in the paper, quite an extensive excerpt was quoted. And according to the publisher rules and other publisher rules, extensive quotation might need permission before that. Before the submission. So just ask an author to come back to the publisher and to clarify whether such a permission is needed, because the quotation itself was really very extensive. It's about half of the page. So it's not sufficient only to put quotation marks and indicate the reference, but some quotations should be really quite minor, to publish them without any permission. Okay, what are the challenges of editorial work? If to speak on the behalf of all stakeholders that I've already introduced, I mean authors and editors. So definitely there is a risk of bias, and definitely editorial bias encompasses diverse interconnected biases. I will explain it in the next slide in more detail. There is editorial favoritism. As you might see, it refers to a form of discrimination by journal editors. And that discrimination might happen because of ethnic, family, a clan, favoritism, nepotism, and so forth. In other words, I also heard in some specific countries, favoritism is not understood as a form of discrimination or as an ethical behavior, but it is understood as a patronage, which is the must in specific cultures. Then conflict of interest. All parties involved in the publication process should disclose conflicts with regard to funding, employment, financial and non-financial interest. And I will come up with a more comprehensive explanation in the next slides. So, editorial bias and favoritism, these are the examples, just to give you a better understanding what it is about. So in the review process, for example, the editor assigns certain reviewers who might be very negative about the paper, and they probably would always go with the rejection, or they might, in opposite, invite reviewers who are very positive about the paper, which is mean that the editor might not have a genuine feedback about the research quality in the paper. Then the review process might be significantly faster than usual. For example, you have feedback in a couple of weeks, which to my consideration is really unrealistic. And I'd say if you get a feedback in 3 months or 4 months, this is quite a regular term within which all feedback is collected, and it actually is feasible to collect. And definitely that's when you know how the scholar publishing is organized, and when the feedback comes in a couple of weeks, that's really raises suspicious what kind of reviewers and the journal are. Then potential remedies, how to deal with this. So definitely there's a few suggestions. For example, to apply regular rotation of the editorial board members. For example, invite them to contribute to the journal for 3 or 5 years, and then change the roles. Then it's really healthy to establish a procedure for withdrawal from handling the biased manuscript. So again, that's mostly applied to the editor themselves. When they, for example, they get a submission that is co-authored by a person with whom an editor-in-chief has a publication in co-authorship. So definitely this is a biased manuscript, and editor-in-chief should withdraw himself from handling that submission. Definitely assure inclusion and diversity of reviewers, which I really enjoy to do, and look for new reviewers from different countries, that it shouldn't be only reviews mostly from English-speaking countries, but from Africa, from Asia, from less represented European regions, and so forth. So, I mean, this is really, I support that idea, and I enjoy myself in doing this. Okay, financial interest. This is the one that probably would be the most easy to understand, as it relates to the financial support received for your research conduct and publication. So definitely that relates to the funding agency. Maybe you've got a travel grant from the conference organizers, or you provided compensation for consultancy in the form of consultation fees or other forms of remunerations and so forth. And definitely when authors have multiple academic affiliations, and even not necessarily only academic, they have to report the financial interest and include recent, present, or anticipated employment by any organization, and specifically if the project itself transits from one, for example, university to another, which is mean that there was already a portion of the work that has been done at the primary institution, and then the research itself was finalized in another university. So all these should be very carefully considered when answering whether there is any financial interest or not. And why is that so? Because during the evaluation, one or two or both institutions might get advantage from that publication, or even disadvantage if only one institution is indicated in the paper and affiliated to the authors. Then what else can include is financial interest might include stocks and shares in companies. For example, if researcher is working in biomedical sciences and has shares in biomedical pharmaceutical company, it's always suggested to describe this financial interest in the paper. Specifically, if that paper got the financial advantage from publication of the manuscript. Again, patent or patent applications whose value may be affected by publication of the method that is more relevant for our technology sciences. Non-financial interest, they refer to professional interest, personal relationships, or personal beliefs, and so forth, which means something that does not relate to any money or funding in general sense. So these are examples that they provide, or examples of professional interest only. So, for example, serving on the editorial board of the journal, or as a journal editor to which the manuscript is submitted. This rule is not applied if editor-in-chief publish editorials in the journal he edits. But if there is another type of submission, such as, for example, research article, review article, definitely the description of non-financial interest is a must here. Then, having previously published with one or more of the authors who submit the manuscript to the journal in which you have, or I had, as I mentioned in my example, an editorial role. Then sharing the same institution as one or more of other authors who submit the manuscript to the edited journal, which is mean if there will be someone from the Hong Kong School of Economics that submit the paper to the Journal of Academic Ethics, that person should, first of all, to notify about non-financial interest. In my case, I would have an editorial bias, and I would have to withdraw from handling that specific submission. Then serving on the project advisory board, board of directors, or that type of management relationship. Again, it might happen so because in Europe we have quite already a lot of projects that focus on research integrity, open science, And these projects might be interested and are interested in submitting their papers in the Journal of Academic Ethics. So definitely they have to report that this publication is based on the work in the specific project. And for myself, I need also to screen whether I'm involved in that specific project within any role, and consider even my editorial bias. Then hosting an author as a visiting professor for educational purposes or witnessing as an expert. Again, these kind of roles, when we have professional interest and that derive from collaboration, when it comes to the scholarly publishing, they should be very carefully considered. Again, there is no specific term. I mean, how many years back should be recorded and checked every time once the paper is submitted on behalf of authors, or should be handled by the editors. But the most common, what I observe, is about 3 years, sometimes 5 years. That should be taken into account. I mean, the last 3 or 5 years should be taken into account when considering this professional interest. As a couple of evidence, what we ask in the Journal of Academic Ethics is definitely we ask to provide statements about conflict of interest, funding, ethical review, and these statements are the must to provide in the paper. We also recommend to provide statement on data availability, and we encourage authors to open their data sets, either providing a link to their repository or publishing as a paper supplemental material, or at least commit to provide data set open demand. Not definitely to the editor, but as well as to readers who might be interested in these data. Another finding that was recently published and shared by Liu and co-authors, they analyzed the publication record of 20,000 editors. That's quite a nice pool of data set. And they found that 12% publish at least 1/5 and 6% publish at least 1/3 of their papers in the journal they edit. And definitely editors-in-chief, they tend to self-publish at a higher rate. And finally, compared with women, men have a high increase in the rate at which they publish in a journal soon after becoming its editor. So again, this kind of practices are observed. Quite a lot of criticism exists about whether editor-in-chief should publish own papers in the journal they edit. There is quite less support this happening, and one of these that I really found a strong argument in supporting editors who publish their papers in their own journal, if that specific research is a very kind of niche research, and there are not so many journals where to publish that. And definitely when we have evaluation system or assessment system in our universities, we always are expected to contribute with a highly ranked journal. So what if that specific journal is not yet a highly ranked journal, but it publishes niche research? So how to do with that in that specific case? So that's quite, I'd say, a very strong argument why there could be an exception, and such practice could be supported in this specific case. Okay, conflict of interest. Another part of the definition of non-financial interest relates to personal relationships. So I give an example of personal interest. So editors are involved in kinship or romantic relationship with authors, which is mean it might be that a husband is an editor-in-chief, and he handles submissions by his wife or his girlfriend. So again, this is something that should be not only described as a non-financial interest, but that's also part of the editorial bias to handle that specific submission. Okay, I now turn to key roles of reviewers. Definitely, we might have quite different expectations of what reviewers should do, and there's quite a lot of ongoing discussion as the role of reviewers should shift. But I think that something that we agreed on as editors is, first of all, to provide feedback on the quality of the manuscript, as expected quality is defined by the journal. Again, to report alleged malpractice. If you have some suspicions, you might ask editor-in-chief to investigate it and to give more attention to that. Then to collaborate with the editor-in-chief. For example, if the author reports about alleged malpractice of the reviewer, and I think you've got some cases that were scandalous about stealing the paper, as the reviewer suggested rejection, and afterwards the reviewer used that paper as submitted as his own publication to another journal. Okay, quality of a manuscript, again, or the quality of the research, as I mentioned, that depends on each journal how it defines. What I'd like to focus my reviewers on is, first of all, on the content, originality, relevance, rigor, methodology. Definitely to see whether the conclusion derived from the findings, whether implications, research practical implications are suggested, how the paper is structured, maybe they're organized, maybe there are some suggestions to merge two short sections in one, and so forth. Then definitely about figures tables, as it may happen, so that there could be a typo, error, or a missing comment on the table or figure to better understand what is it, what that the data that is provided in the figures and tables are consistent with the description. Definitely language. Language is also important, and it's I think it's okay if the authors are suggested to revise English language. Definitely the journal cannot help and facilitate this part of the work, and the author should handle by themselves how to prove English. But definitely poor English is not a reason to reject the paper. They definitely provide information ethical approval. I know that there are some countries, there's still quite a lot of countries that do not have an established ethical review procedure, and sometimes the authors might feel trapped because of this missing crucial component in their research practice. But again, editor-in-chief, it has data updated not annually but biannually, about which countries have established ethical procedures, who supervise ethical procedures, and so on. So definitely, even if the reviewer has a question about ethical approval, editor-in-chief might make an evaluation and judgment whether this comment is a must to address. And definitely data availability, reviewers and editors might ask to, for example, include the questionnaire as a supplemental material of the paper to make it reusable for others if they want to conduct the same study in their own countries, or maybe even provide a link to the data set if it's open. Okay, what does it mean to be a reviewer, as suggested by COPE? So definitely authors who have benefited from the peer review process are expected that they will contribute not only as authors but as reviewers as well, and it's taken as part of their professional responsibilities. So definitely sometimes I feel saddened because the author who has recently published a paper in the Journal of Academic Ethics declines an invitation to review. But definitely, I'm happy when they indicate the reason of it. So definitely, there is an objective reason behind this when they decline. But I wish they contribute in the same way as they got advantage of the feedback from the journal reviewers. Then when approached to review or agree to review, only if you have the specific expertise, just as a master, because it may happen sometimes that you cannot make a feedback on the whole manuscript. And something that you could provide on is you should, as a reviewer, contact the editor-in-chief, specify your expertise. For example, I can comment the introduction, literature review, methodology, and probably conclusion, but not finding themselves, and maybe part of the methodology, because, for example, I'm not a quantitative researcher, and definitely statistics is not the expertise of that specific reviewer. So this should be this should be openly communicated to the editor-in-chief, so he or she could take into consideration that another reviewer with this missing expertise should be looked for. So definitely it's really good to identify and admit that there is a gap in your expertise, because definitely we are not expert in all fields. We have our specialty and we are the best in these things. And then definitely declare all potential competing or conflicting interests. For example, if the paper is submitted based on the project funding, but when the invitation comes, usually a reviewer sees only an abstract, and only once it accepts to review, he or she is able to see the full text manuscript. And only then the reviewer might figure out that he has a conflict of interest, and that should be instantly reported to the editor-in-chief. And afterwards, the editor-in-chief will handle whether to proceed or not with a specific submission, because that depends on what kind of interest these competing interests are based on. Okay, what else as to be a reviewer? It is courteous to respond to an invitation to peer review within a reasonable time frame. I do know that some reviewers that I communicated in the conference that mentioned by Professor Chow, University of Derby, was saying me that, that's only 30 days to provide the reviews, to provide a review. So I have to tell them and calm that, these 30 days start counting once you accept the invitation, not because I send you the invitation, but once you accept the invitation, this is when these 30 days start counting. So definitely that's either word, because if the letter comes back in a week or two, that the reviewer declined, accepted, that is how I can proceed further with another work related to that specific submission. Then, as already mentioned, this when you respond, I didn't mention that aspect, but I mention now, if in our life, it can happen quite different things. And even we are asked to provide the feedback in 30 days. Definitely, if you're lucky, you can provide it sooner. But sometimes you have some moments in your life that you're not able to provide in time, and you need much more time to provide the feedback. What is the best option is just as soon as possible to contact the editor-in-chief and ask for an extension. I'm sure you will always be granted with that extension, as it happens in my journal as well. Always inform the journal if you, for example, you are no longer able to provide the feedback. I don't know, maybe you just got too tired, you are no longer in the academia, you saw that you're going to provide the feedback in time, but it took much more time and so forth. So definitely any reason you have, either continue with the provision of the feedback or you want to decline, so you accept it. To review the paper, please just contact the editor-in-chief as soon as possible. And if that's the case, that to decline or you'll withdraw from the handling of the submission, which is mean providing your feedback, please suggest alternative reviewers that might be relevant for that specific manuscript topic. That also is the work of the editor-in-chief. But again, editor-in-chief always have to explore expertise of specific suggested alternative reviewers and so forth. So again, suggestion doesn't mean that these persons will be invited, but that's quite a nice gesture from the reviewers to suggest their colleagues, not specifically from the universities, it could be from another countries and so forth, that could contribute even if you decide to decline. Okay, what does it mean to conduct a review? If there is no clear structure, what should be addressed, what the journal focuses on, definitely you can get back to the journal and ask for clarifications. You will always be guided as a reviewer. Definitely you're not suggested to contact the authors directly without the permission of the journal. This rule is applied when open peer review is applied. Then respect the confidentiality of the peer review process, which is do not share the manuscript, do not discuss them within your department or with your PhD students or wherever they are, because the manuscript itself is confidential and it is known for editor-in-chief and the reviewers only. So definitely refrain from taking any other advantage, for example, as using in your lectures and so forth. And if you see that specific paper is worth to include in the lectures for teaching purposes, for learning purposes, before doing that, please again ask permission from the journal, which is contact editor-in-chief, so he could discuss it with the author and then only use it for the teaching purposes. Then remain unbiased by considerations related to the nationality, religious or political beliefs, gender, or other characteristics of the authors, origins of a manuscript, or by commercial considerations, because sometimes from the manuscript you can figure out maybe that paper is written by researchers from Italy or France and so on. So definitely sometimes you can, as a reviewer, you might have such an assumption, not necessarily that's the true assumptions, but definitely objectivity in providing the review is the must. Then if you suspect the identity of the author, notify the journal. And if editor-in-chief sees this as potential conflict of interest, it takes further actions. Then if you come across any irregularities with respect to research and publication ethics, please let the journal know and share your observations. If a manuscript is rejected from one journal and submitted to another, because there is kind of a trendy thing is to use this transfer desk, so to ease the submission stage for authors, the reviewer is asked to review the same manuscript. It may happen so, and it's also happened once in my journal. So the reviewer should be prepared to review the manuscript afresh, as it may have changed between the two submissions, and the journal criteria for evaluation and acceptance might be different. So definitely this should be taken into account, that so the submission bears the same title and the same abstract. It was already revised and improved based on the feedback received from the initial journal. And definitely try to accommodate requests from journals to review revisions or a submission of manuscripts you have reviewed previously, because I think it's fair for authors to have the feedback on the revised manuscript from the ones reviewers who provided the initial feedback, because if to invite another reviewer who did not contribute to the first submission stage and review, definitely they might bring other comments or even bring another round of revision. So in such situations still happens even in the Journal of Academic Ethics, but definitely there is expectation behind the editors-in-chief that if a paper was reviewed, the first version of the paper was reviewed by you as reviewer, please revise the revised manuscript and provide your feedback whether your suggestions were well addressed and so forth. Okay, there is the last group of stakeholders, potential roles of readers, and how they can contribute to this. So definitely they can critically appraise the findings. And that's why, for example, there is a need to have a science education in the high schools. So already students, pupils could have basics, how science is done and how it should be read. And definitely once this knowledge is here, you can expect that readers might critically appraise the findings and provide feedback and raise some questions, but definitely even to blow the whistle about alleged practices if they see inconsistency in statistical analysis. Definitely, there's also opportunity to publish a letter to the editor as part of the society. I've never faced that opportunity or encountered that practice, but I wish that once it might happen. Then opportunity to co-author an article, for example, when involved in the citizen science project. So citizen science is a research that is conducted both by professional researchers and by the lay people altogether, which means lay people are not participating as regular research participants, but they contribute to, for example, research design, to data collection, data analysis, and so forth. So if they meet authorship criteria, they can be co-authors of such a publication. Later, I will show you an example of this. Okay, what is ethical authorship? I give an example from Alexandre Dumas' father. I think you know this, a very prominent writer from France. Dumas had co-authors, and he benefited from the use of services of numerous assistants and collaborators. And this was regular practice in the literary milieu of the 19th century. Definitely the works that have been written were signed only under his own name. And so he didn't provide any credit and didn't include as co-author these assistants and collaborators. And novels of Dumas made him very wealthy. So if to look at this practice that happened in the 19th century, that was a regular practice, but that's not an ethical practice in these days. So the most common problems with authorship, there is a request to change the list of authors, for example, removing, excluding an existing author or adding a new author after a manuscript already has been submitted. And this one request is quite challenging to handle, as to my knowledge, the most common practice of editors is to reject this request. Then requiring a person to be added as a co-author after the manuscript has been submitted or published. Submission of the manuscript without the knowledge of one or more of the authors of that manuscript. And definitely we have ghost authorship, gift or guest authorship. So I'm going to dig a bit in more details in some forms of these authorships later on. But this is the most common problem with authorship, when authorship is misinterpreted, as there is a lack of knowledge about criteria, who should be included among authors and who should be acknowledged as a contributor. So what happens when we have such scale of problems with authorship? We definitely have a large list of publications. We might observe that that specific person has no specific expertise, but he has publication in multiple fields. From even, I saw one record about the professor who had expertise in any field of sciences, technology, social sciences, biomedical science, and so forth, which really has huge doubts what his contribution is and was to be co-author of that specific publication. And definitely there is a study published by Ioannidis, Clavans, and Boyac, who said that publishing a paper every 5 days, which is mean these 5 days include your research idea, research design, research conduct, the writing the paper, getting feedback or review from reviewers, and publishing. So definitely it really raises huge suspicions about authorship. So authorship criteria are defined by COPE, by International Committee of Medical Journal Editors, and you can find this criteria defined by other international bodies in specific field of sciences. I will present just a few of them. So if ISMG recommend that authorship be based on the following four criteria. As you might see, there is only flexibility in first criteria, when the researcher can decide on his contribution, which is mean that there should be substantial contribution to the conception or design of the work, or the acquisition, analysis, or interpretation of data for the work. Then the contribution that must is to draft the work and review it critically for important intellectual content. I mean, technical remarks are not taken as part of intellectual content. Then final approval of the version to be published, which is mean that each author should be okay with the version of the paper that is going to be submitted. And definitely there should be agreement to be accountable for all aspects of the work, unless otherwise is described in the paper declaration section. Then we have authorship criteria defined by the Council of Science Editors. So it says very clearly that individual listed as authors should review and approve the final manuscript before publication. In addition, they are accountable for the part they wrote, which is mean they will bear responsibility if something happens only for specific part of the work. But if that declaration of contribution is missing in the paper, then responsibility should be borne by all researchers that are authors of that specific publication. And also the ultimate reason for identification of authors and other contributors is just for not only for transparency, but also for accountability if something is reported about the paper. Authorship criteria by COPE, and I'd say the minimum requirements for authorship that are common to all definitions, whatever you are looking at. First of all, the contribution to the work should be substantial, and the one who author specific publication is accountable for that work as it is presented, or the way the findings and other parts of the research are described there. Therefore, it's always suggested to adhere to the criteria for authorship with the respective disciplines. So substantial contribution to the work. I give just an example, contributor role taxonomy credit, which consists of 14 stages and it comes. It starts with the research conduct, ends with the publication draft. Definitely not all these components point to authorship. The ones that are in green, definitely if you contributed to these green parts, you can rely on being co-author of the paper. As for the orange one, that depends on the research design and on the field of sciences. At some instances, it could be only taken as a technical work. At some instances, taken as intellectual work. So that should be carefully considered, while blue ones are definitely is not subject to co-authorship. So these, if there's someone who contributed to these only stages, they should be acknowledged, which is at the end of the paper, not co-author the paper itself. Okay, what can be done to practice ethical authorship? Definitely, I suggest informing beforehand about recording each contribution. So everyone in the research team would know that their contribution will be observed. Then each contribution should be carefully recorded, as for example suggested in the credit taxonomy. Then reach an agreement afterwards, which is mean that please share your record of each contribution, ask whether each researcher agrees with that, whether there is something missing, or maybe there is an honest error in recording contribution. And after all, when you reach an agreement, you can already easily describe it in the manuscript. The further example I want to share is the one by Finland, 10 guidelines. And this is a tool for considering authorship. As you may see, it's quite a similar structure in a table format. To record each contribution, you have stages, and definitely these stages can be enriched. That depends on the specific research. You have the list of authors, and that's the way how you proceed to record each contribution. Then reach an agreement on, based on which criteria the authorship is granted, structure, and suggest the order of authors. As you may see, for example, on the first order is author 2, not author 1. So definitely that can shift, depends on the length of the contribution. And definitely suggested to put the date on agreement, that it's okay with the suggestion order and the role, and just ask to sign it. What else to do with practical ethical authorship is definitely, that's a term that I've never faced. So it comes from my own expertise because we have a good research record. Keeping practice, I would say, when it comes to ethical authorship, good authorship record practice. These are the steps that I already mentioned, and definitely they are healthy even to encourage others to continue contributing to the research conduct and writing of the paper. In addition to that, there is always suggestion to make contractual agreements on data ownership and other intellectual property rights, because you can have this contractual agreement as initial authorship, but after the research ends, you can make revision of this contractual agreement and to make final authorship. What it contributes to, it actually helps to agree. For example, if there is a rich data set and you didn't manage to publish papers using all research data set, then you might agree whether anyone who uses this data set should co-author the paper or not. If they should co-author, what kind of engagement is expected, or if you open data set, there is no such issue anymore, because anyone can give credit to your data set and use it, and you use it for their research design. So again, this kind of issues, then even when you transit from one institution to another, these contractual agreements help you to deal with how to handle or how to use the data received from this research. And definitely accurate record of authorship in curriculum vitae, either in recruitment dossier, blog, and so on. In my practice, I learned one case when a researcher in the recruitment dossier wanted to bring a highlight that he contributed to a specific publication, and he changed the order by putting his name in the front, which is as the first author, which was erroneous and misleading record about contribution. So my suggestion is, if you want to highlight your contribution to a specific paper, just you can make your family name in capital letters, but you should not change the order of authors. Okay, co-authoring with, let's say, students, citizens, and artificial intelligence, which is the ones who are not your regular colleagues, if I can describe it this way. So if we take students, if the manuscript is based on the student's work, let's say master thesis, doctoral dissertation, or thesis, the student should be the first author. This is not a supervisor who is the first author, but the student. If the manuscript is based on the student work, the contribution of co-authors should be explicitly identified. It happens so that the master thesis is quite a good material to produce a research paper. And in my practice, it happens so that you've got a manuscript that shows probably over 80% of text matches. After perusal and revising all text matches, you see that these parts come from the final paper, but co-authors are 2 or even 3, which is not good with authorship, which is there is an authorship issue, because there is no contribution for author that is clearly visible and identifiable in that specific paper. Another example from the students of what I also found in the database, for example, there is a paper published by Weiss and Lalonde, and there is a declaration that this paper is based on a master thesis by the first author and was supported by a grant to the second author. So definitely there is kind of information explaining how to co-author with students. If we have citizens, it's feasible when implementing citizen science project, as I already mentioned earlier. There's an example of preprint. As you might see, the names are of likely researchers, but there is one group of author which is called stall catchers contributors, which is definitely, this is not kind of human that has a passport, but that's a group who cannot be identified. As you may see in the footnote, it says that the worldwide list of individual stall catchers contributors who contributed to the study is at, and the website link. So this is something of emerging practice, I'd say, to consider when there is a conduct of science project, how to publish if these lay people are highly engaged in the research. Then artificial intelligence, definitely no co-authorship, as artificial intelligence is not able to take responsibility for the entire work or for a piece of the work, as already described under authorship criteria. And Journal of Academic Ethics, they have such a statement that large language models do not currently satisfy authorship criteria unless authorship criteria will change over time. And definitely that should be reported in the manuscript, either in the method section, most preferably, but definitely it could be reported in other parts of the paper, but it's also recommended to mention it in the cover letter to the editor-in-chief. Definitely, artificial intelligence is not a devil, I'd say. It can help and facilitate researchers' life, definitely in assisting in writing, such as language editing, translation, customizing the readability level to the journal audience, suggesting paper structure, which relies rather on some technical work. Then there is other role as creating visuals with the one you would like to have, but that's probably for arts rather than assisting in coding, which is in helping during code writing and code analytics. And then definitely peer reviewing assistance, which means detecting unclear arguments, suggesting missing references, and so on. But definitely there is a high level of accuracy, uncertainty, and anything that is suggested by artificial intelligence should be very carefully checked before the use. Okay, there's another group of researchers that you might face as well, is our independent researchers who have no affiliation with an academic or other institution, or in fact the affiliation exists, but the researcher opts to conceal his affiliation. But in practice, we have papers published by such type of researchers, which mean unaffiliated researchers, or more broader concept, independent researchers. And there is an example from the Journal of Academic Ethics, as you may see. Eria More published a paper in the Journal of Academic Ethics 3 years ago. And there is only country affiliated, there is no institution affiliation. El Sabri study shows that there is an increasing number of publications authored by independent researcher, and these data come from the Scopus database. And there are assumptions why such process is happening. So he distilled 4 main reasons. First one, individuals have an interest in one area of research and can spend sufficient time to do quality research and publish its results on the top of their daily work, which they have probably passion for the pursuit of research. Job duties do not include research and scholarship, but his expertise, competence allows this to do. Then when a researcher is experiencing a long transition period in their career shift, then researchers are employed by governmental research units who publish results that government might not want to be affiliated with, and researchers who publish sporadically after retirement. These are assumptions why we have the increase of independent researchers in recent years. There is another study very recently published that observes a similar trend, that the publication associated with independent researchers is increasing, and the data were taken from the Web of Science core collection. Again, what they suggest that independent researchers struggle with access to literature and laboratories, and they do not receive funding for the research. The lack of attention and peer reviews of their papers, specifically if an open peer review process is applied. They might struggle with ethical review and approval. If there is no such procedure established in the country that facilitate the work of independent researchers, and definitely because of these struggles, they are very limited in choosing the research design. So definitely we've got assumptions why there is increase of independent researchers, but we also see their struggles. Some of these struggles might be solved. I'm sorry. Might be solved, and additional solutions are suggested while joining the National Coalition of Independent Scholars. So I probably still have 5 minutes to continue, so I'm going to end up my presentation with unethical authorship. And there are a few types of unethical authorship, such as gift or guest authorship, mutual admiration authorship, invented authorship, coercion authorship, and ghost authorship. Some of these ones I have already mentioned. So gift or guest authorship, when the authorship is given to the one who didn't contribute substantially or had no contribution to the paper. Ghost authorship is an opposite, when someone who contributed substantially, but he is not included among co-authors. Coercion authorship, when the authorship is requested and not granted on voluntary basis. Then mutual admiration authorship is when there is an agreement between researchers. For example, that the researcher says, okay, can you include me in the courses of that paper, and when I will be working on my publication, I will include you. So this is kind of exchange in authorship without any contribution. Then there is another kind of authorship, is invented authorship, and I will proceed further to explain it in more detail. The one that already mentioned by Professor Chow, that in January we'll have Elizabeth Bick, and she make a comment on that researcher photoshopped his name onto a Nature Communication paper, which is means just to take the whole paper, you just photoshop the names, the true names of this paper, put yours, and also make a Twitter post about the paper that you assumedly published, which is definitely is not true, it's a fake. And definitely there is another observation that you might find in the Retraction Watch website about researchers who fake their names of Duke and University of Chicago co-authors, which means they included the persons who even don't exist in the world. Misleading record on authorship, already mentioned one, that researchers should be very accurate in providing the list of publication and specifying authors and specifically order of authors. So that shouldn't be changed. It should be presented as an original version. Then the researcher indicates non-existing or wrong affiliations in the published paper. What happens with the latter one? Definitely, it could be a question whether affiliating authorship during their career shifts. That's the main reason why it is happening, which is mean that we need to see whether it's really non-existing or there is no legitimacy behind to indicate a specific affiliation. For example, because the researcher in that transition, it might have current affiliation, previous affiliation, future affiliation, affiliation looking to enhance its academic ranking. That can be a part of the discussion, what affiliation to indicate in the publication. Then on another affiliation looking to boost its academic rank, there is a discussion and some evidence that some researchers are paid to show specific institution as part of the affiliation. Then affiliation with short training on how to use a new lab device has been followed, or where a plasmid has been gifted, or where a lab mouse has been provided. Again, this institution can claim that they should be indicated as affiliation to the researcher's publication. So affiliating authorship during their career shifts, definitely, first of all, the first thing that should be very clear is about legitimacy to use an affiliation at certain transition periods. which is if the contract is terminated, definitely the general rule is that the use of affiliation stops by that day as well, unless there is another agreement with that specific institution how its affiliation can be further used for a specific time period. Then researchers should inform the institution and request its advice on the indication of affiliation in specific cases. So again, these cases should be identified by the researcher who is in the transition of his career. And another option is a specific when the surname of a researcher changes due to different circumstances, either, for example, because of marriage, divorce, or changing the gender and so forth. So definitely the record should be smooth in the way that it could be put as a one list for that specific person. So I'm close to the end of my presentation. At the end, you will see all references that were used to make this presentation to you. And if you still have any questions and you will be able to formulate it after this event, feel free to contact me via email, or as I mentioned, through Twitter or LinkedIn. It's up to you, your preference.